200,000 people packed into one stadium, the largest crowd ever assembled to watch a football match. And every single one of them believed the same thing. Brazil had already won, they hadn't. But they believed it. And that belief, that absolute, unshakable certainty, is exactly why what happened next destroyed a nation. It was July 16, 1950. The Maracanazo Stadium in Rio de Janeiro had been built for this exact moment. Constructed in under 2 years, it was the largest sporting arena on earth, and Brazil had filled every seat, every staircase, every inch of standing room. The streets outside were empty. The entire country had stopped. Brazil needed only a draw to win the World Cup. Their opponents, Uruguay, needed to win outright. The math was simple. The outcome felt inevitable. The Brazilian newspaper O Mundo had already printed its front page the night before, a photo of the Brazilian squad with the headline, "These are the world champions." The trophy had already been engraved with Brazil's name. Think about that for a moment. The trophy, already engraved. To understand why this happened, you need to go back further than the match itself. You need to understand what football meant to Brazil in 1950, and why a loss on a football pitch could shatter the soul of an entire country. Brazil in 1950 was not yet the footballing superpower you know today. The country was hungry, not just for a trophy, but for proof. Proof that it belonged on the world stage. Proof that its people, its culture, its particular brand of brilliant, expressive, free-flowing football was the finest the world had ever produced. The man building that proof was Flávio Costa, Brazil's head coach. Costa was methodical, confident, and deeply aware of the weight his squad carried. His players were not just athletes, they were symbols. Zizinho, the attacking midfielder, who many Brazilian journalists considered the greatest player alive, was at the peak of his powers. Ademir de Menezes had finished the tournament as its top scorer with 8 goals. Jair do Rosa Pinto had terrorized every defense Brazil faced. This squad had dismantled Sweden 7-1, they had beaten Spain 6-1, they had scored 13 goals in 3 matches leading up to the final stage. They were not merely good, they were overwhelming. Uruguay, meanwhile, had scraped through. Their route to the deciding match had been far less convincing. A 2-2 to draw with Spain, a narrow 3-2 to win over Sweden. They were battle-worn, shorter on goals, shorter on the kind of momentum that makes a team feel unstoppable. And yet, Juan Lopez, Uruguay's coach, saw something in his squad that the world outside had missed. He saw Obdulio Varela. Varela was Uruguay's captain. He was 33 years old, built like a man who had been carved from the streets of Montevideo, and possessed of a quality that no journalist, no analyst, no trophy engraver had thought to account for. He simply did not believe Brazil would win. Not as arrogance, not as delusion, as genuine, considered, calm certainty. The night before the match, Varela walked into a bar near the team hotel and ordered a drink. His teammates found him there, relaxed, unhurried, apparently unbothered by the fact that 200,000 Brazilians were going to be screaming for his team's defeat the following afternoon. When a journalist asked him how he felt about playing in front of that crowd, Varela looked at him steadily and said, "The ball is round and the match is 90 minutes. Kickoff came. And for the first half, everything Brazil's supporters believed seemed correct. The Brazilians moved the ball with beauty and urgency. Uruguay defended deep, compact, cautious. The first half ended goalless, but the pressure was entirely Brazil's then. 2 minutes into the second half, Frioca scored. The Maracanazo erupted. The noise was described by journalists present as something beyond sound, a physical force, a wave of emotion that rolled across the pitch and made the ground itself seem to shake. Brazil had their goal. They needed only to hold it. Varela picked up the ball. He walked, not ran, to the referee. He began arguing, slowly, calmly, about whether the goal should stand. The referee confirmed it was valid. Varela already knew that. He wasn't disputing the goal. He was using up time. He was letting the noise in the Maracanazo reach its peak and begin to fade. He was forcing his own players to stop, breathe, regroup, and remember who they were. It was one of the most calculated acts of psychological leadership in the history of the sport. 11 minutes later, Juan Schiaffino equalized. The stadium went silent in a way that those who were there would spend the rest of their lives trying to describe. 200,000 people making no sound at all. It was, one reporter wrote, like watching a light go out across an entire city. Brazil pushed forward. They had to win now. A draw was no longer enough. And in pushing forward, they left space. The space that Alcides Giglia had been waiting for. Giglia was Uruguay's right winger. He was fast, direct, and had spent the entire match probing the left side of Brazil's defense. With 11 minutes remaining, he received the ball on the right flank. He drove forward. The Brazilian goalkeeper Mocha Barbosa came to narrow the angle. Expecting a cross, Giglia did not cross. He shot. The ball went between Barbosa and his near post. Uruguay led 2-1. The Maracanazo fell silent again. But this time, the silence did not lift. The final whistle blew. Uruguay had won the World Cup. The trophy that had been engraved with Brazil's name was handed to Obdulio Varela, who lifted it quietly, without theatrical celebration, in front of 200,000 people who could not speak. Jules Rimet, the FIFA president who handed over the trophy, later said it was the saddest moment of his life. He had expected to give a speech. He had prepared words. Instead, he simply pressed the trophy into Varela's hands and walked away. There was nothing appropriate to say. What followed in Brazil was not a riot. It was something more devastating than a riot. It was collective grief. The Brazilian players were not celebrated or consoled. They were blamed. Barbosa, the goalkeeper, bore the heaviest weight. He was black, and Brazil's football press, operating within a deeply racist framework, immediately focused on him as the primary reason for the defeat. In the weeks and months that followed, the narrative hardened into something cruel and permanent, that Barbosa's weakness at the near post had cost Brazil the World Cup. Barbosa spent the rest of his life carrying that accusation. He was never selected for the Brazilian national team again. In 1963, he burned the goalposts from the Maracanazo in his back garden, the actual posts from that match, which he had somehow kept, in an attempt, he said, to exorcise what they represented. When he appeared in public in later years, strangers would sometimes point at him and say, "That is the man who made Brazil cry. He died in 2000. The year Brazil hosted another major tournament, without ever receiving a public apology or rehabilitation from the country whose grief he had become the vessel for. The defeat became known in Brazil as the Maracanazo. It shaped everything that came after. The yellow and blue kit Brazil had worn that day was abandoned, considered cursed, and replaced with the now iconic yellow shirt and blue shorts combination that became synonymous with Brazilian football for the next 7 decades. The Maracanazo drove Brazil's obsession with winning the World Cup in 1958. Drove the emergence of Pelé, who was 7 years old on the day of that match and later said he watched his father cry for the first time in his life when the final whistle blew. It drove the tactical and cultural transformation of Brazilian football that produced the most successful footballing nation in the history of the World Cup, 5 titles, the most of any country on earth. Every Brazilian World Cup triumph since 1950 has been shadowed by that afternoon. Every golden generation has been measured against the ghost of the one that failed when it was certain it could not. Giglia, who scored the winning goal, lived until 2015. He was the last surviving player from that match. In his final years, he was sometimes asked how it felt to have silenced the largest crowd in football history with a single shot. He always gave the same answer. He said, "Only 3 people have ever silenced the Maracanazo: Sinatra, Pope John Paul II, and me." He was right on all 3 counts, and on July 16, 1950, when 200,000 people packed into one stadium and every single one of them believed Brazil had already won, a 33-year-old Uruguayan captain ordered a drink the night before, picked up the ball after the opening goal, and walked calmly to a referee he had no intention of convincing. He already knew the match wasn't over, was the only one in that stadium who did.